Hi, I'm Jerry Smith. It was 1963. I was a sophomore at Northern Illinois University, and I remember going to a campus demonstration on the lawn of what is now Altgeld Hall. And there was a student leader by the name of Barry Schrader. And Barry Schrader and I have known each other since 1963 when we were students on the Northern Star. And over the next hour or so, we'd like to share with you some of the things that have happened over what is now spanned to be an over 50-year friendship, a 50-year period. So this guy to my left here, or to your right, is Barry Schrader. Well, hi, Barry.
Hi, Jerry. Thank you. That's a pretty good introduction. I don't have to repeat all that. I was not actually a campus leader. I was sort of an agitator, rabble-rouser.
Muckraker.
I never got elected to office on campus because the student senate really didn't want a lot to do with us because we were always in trouble. And even the Northern Star didn't really like me too much because I was always questioning authority. And Roy Campbell, who was your friend, mentor, was not a friend and mentor of mine. In fact, I broke off from the Northern Star my senior year and started my own underground campus magazine called The Quarterback.
Yes, I remember.
And we had a lot of trouble with the administration. We can go into that at some other point. But anyway, yes, we've been friends a long time, except for about a 2-year period in our lives when we were head-to-head competitors, right?
Yeah, and I think that perhaps the majority of this program today will be devoted to those years from 1970, 71, 72, where we were competitors. A lot had happened from the time Barry graduated and I graduated, and a lot of water had gone over our proverbial dams, if you will. But yeah, we were to ultimately find each other competing in that early 70s time period. But I'd like to get back, Barry, if you don't mind, chronologically somewhat to talk about those days at Northern. We shared time on the Northern Star. I had come up in 61 as a student and, as you say, had met Roy Campbell and I think started in the Northern Star in 1963. And I really looked up to you because at the time, you were a rabble-rouser. You were someone who was aggressive, did not take whatever the university might be saying as gospel. And so, I've been looking up to you for the most part ever since. We've been friends, and I'd like to just, if I may, turn into an interviewer here, ask you about those early days in 63 and how that evolved into the quarterback and evolved into one of my favorite stories, and that is how you almost got tossed out of school.
Okay. Basically, it took me 5 years to get through Northern. I started in 58, but I was such a poor student. I spent all my time at the Northern Star. A lot of journalism majors were that way. Academics was second of importance to us. So about 62 is when I started this organization called The Quarterback, along with two other editors, Wally Wold and Rolf Johnson. We had decided at that time that the administration and the Northern Star were too close, and there wasn't any other voice on campus. And so we went to a couple of faculty members, Earl Hayter and Walt Wernick, and then Ken Owens, and then Mr. Camp in the English department, and asked them to be our advisors for an off-campus paper. Well, we put out one issue of The Quarterback in 62, and then the administration said that we don't have our student association approval. We had to get SAS approval, or we couldn't distribute them on campus. So we did go to the student association and we got approval. We worked out of a basement of the United, I guess it was the Unitarian Church basement or United church basement, where we put out our issues and tried to come out monthly during the school year, but didn't have enough money to do it. We were trying to sell ads and didn't have much luck there. Anyway, we attracted other, what should I say, students who were
Student activists.
Student activists is a nice word. That's a nice word for it.
Yeah.
Like Kathy and George Davis, who became the editors after I stepped down after my first. The reason I stepped down after 1 year was my grades dropped below C average, and the Student Association would not allow you to have an activity, be a participant in an activity. So I had to step back and be a writer and an instigator in the background.
Yeah.
But anyway, the Northern Star took a dim view of us. They did run a couple stories on us, but I guess they considered us a threat because we made fun of them. We criticized them as not taking enough strong stands against Les Holmes, the president at that time in the administration. I guess you want me to tell about how I nearly got kicked out of school.
Yeah, one of my favorite stories.
We formed a committee for student rights, and we had 12 demands that we presented to Dean Pike and Dean Haddock, a couple of fishes.
Right.
What a name for Ruth Haddock and Dean Pike.
Two
Milton
deans
Pike.
at Northern Illinois.
Yes.
One was named Pike and the other was named Haddock.
Yeah.
It's one of those things like you couldn't have thunk it up.
That's right.
You couldn't make stuff up like that.
That's right. That's right. Anyway, we organized this group and gave this ultimatum of 12 demands for student rights, included no more student hours for the girls because they had to be in at Neptune and other halls at 10 o'clock at night on weeknights, and the boys could stay out all night. And so this was an unequal treatment of students. And then we had other issues about black student housing in DeKalb.
Yes.
Because there was a lot of discrimination at that time.
Yeah.
We had other issues about dormitory food even, and some other miscellaneous things that were upsetting to a lot of the students. So we took that to the Student Senate and then presented it at the same time to the administration. They took a dim view of this, didn't pay much attention to us, so we decided to call a campus-wide demonstration, a protest, and wanted them to call off classes. Of course, some of the classes actually did call off, but we had over 2,000 students on that lawn where Loudon Hall is now. And before the meeting, the deans called us that President Holmes did not show up. He did not come to the meeting. He came. He told the deans that this could get out of hand, and this was a very bad idea. And of course, anytime you have a president that feels the campus is, things are out of control, so they told me in no uncertain terms that if there was one broken window, if one rock was thrown, if anything happened, I would be out of school. I would be out of there, and I was my junior year, my second junior year. So I was very nervous, but we called the students together who were running this demonstration and called for calm and to make sure we had some monitors in the crowd. There'd be no breaking windows. There'd be no problems. As when we wanted the administrators to come up and speak. In fact, Holmes did show up to speak, and he was not booed even, which is unusual. Today would be booed. But anyway, the demonstration went on off on the lawn. Okay. It happened to be the very day that our Sergeant Shriver,
from the Peace
new
Corps,
head of the Peace Corps, was visiting because we had the Malaysian Peace Corps contingent here on campus, and so our Sergeant Shriver thought this was a wonderful chance to talk to students. So when we were up in front of the science building there with our little platform, he came up with President Holmes and got up and talked to the students. Of course, he said, if you want to be activists, join the Peace Corps. And that was his big pitch. So President Holmes got up there and introduced him, very grim-faced. I have photos. I should have brought them. Not at all happy. And he was as I said, talk very briefly and let our Sergeant Shriver do most of the talking, but it went well. We met then with the administration after that, and I think maybe they gave us 3 things out of the 12 to appease us, and then school ended for the year, and of course everybody went home, and so we didn't get a lot accomplished, but at least we brought these issues to their attention and did get a lot of publicity in the Chicago Tribune and the Chronicle and wherever about the student uprising at Northern. Not like the one that happened after Kent State, which is a riot. This was not a riot. This was
I was the editor of a newspaper in DeKalb, the DeKalb Journal, during that time that Roten Smith, the president then, was sitting on the bridge with the students.
In the baseball cap.
And the baseball cap, yes. So we could chat about that a little bit at some point. But what's impressed me, Barry, is that fast forward to just this past year, and here is a article in the DeKalb Chronicle by Barry Schrader, radical claim that I was a muckraker. And I don't know who'd make that claim, although you claim that it was me.
It was you.
Yes. And here's a picture of our Sergeant Shriver and Leslie Holmes, then the president at Northern, on the lawn there, which is now Loudon Hall. And I'm impressed, Barry, that not only have you the memory still at your old age to recall things like that and to write about it, but you are still in a position where people are talking about tossing you out of buildings.
Off of the roof of buildings.
I mean, you are still a lightning rod in our community, and I say that affectionately, I say that positively. You have not let go of that quality in you that has allowed you to be a very, very successful newspaper man. And I want you to chat a little bit about after you graduated in '63 and how you got involved in the newspaper business, and how ultimately you would join an organization that I would join, and then we can talk a little bit about what some folks still like to chat about, and that is the competitive nature of Barry Schrader and Jerry Smith back in the early '70s.
Okay, well, after I graduated, I got my first job up in Byron, a weekly editor for the three papers owned by Jerry Piper and John Van Sickle. Then I had a year later a chance to buy my hometown paper, the Genoa Republican, because the two men that owned it, C. Coleman Schoolmaker and Art Getman, were past retirement age, and they wanted to sell out. So I was able to buy this paper for $2,500 down on a $49,000 note that they gave me, so that I had to pay them by the year. So that was my first foray into DeKalb County journalism as far as being an editor publisher. Then they wanted to sell me their paper in Kirkland because it was a money loser. It was only 700 circulations, very small town. So I bought that from them. I only paid I think $2,500 for that one for the subscription list. There was no office, and Fern Warden was a publisher or editor there for me. Then I met up with some gentlemen from the DeKalb area, John Castle, Fillmore Iskowich, Phil Schmidt, Sam Brody, and a couple of others came in later, and they were interested in creating a countywide newspaper to compete with the Chronicle. They were very dissatisfied with the old ownership and the way the Chronicle had dominated the county in a very Republican newspaper, and they considered it very stodgy and was not serving the best interests of the county. So I joined with them. We formed the DeKalb County Press Incorporated. They took over with me the papers that I already owned, the Kirkland paper, the Genoa Republican, and then we decided we wanted to buy the Sycamore True Republican and Sycamore Tribune from the Dean family. They would not sell. So John Castle and the board of the DeKalb County Press said, we'll start up a new newspaper. Barry, go out there and start a new Wednesday morning paper called the Sycamore Sun. And we'll compete with the established newspapers in Sycamore because they're in such bad shape. They're running on old letterpress equipment. George Dean, who was running the paper for his mother, was not really interested in covering the community anymore. They had Seda Lilia was the society correspondent, and that was about it. So we started a new newspaper, opened up in a dentist down in the basement of a dentist's office there in the 100 block of West State Street, and the Sycamore Sun came out, and we blanketed. We controlled circulation in the entire community of Sycamore, so everybody got that paper. So what happened was after 3 or 4 months, they were losing all the advertising to us. So they then came back with an offer to sell, and I think we paid like $50,000 for that whole plant, and not the building, but the plant, and then all the old equipment in there. That was a point where we merged the Sycamore Sun with the Sycamore Tribune. That was they had a Wednesday Friday publication of Sycamore Tribune one day, and then Sycamore True Republican, which was the oldest paper in the county, over 100 years old. And we created the Sycamore Sun Tribune, and then kept the True Republican on Fridays, so that came out. Well, at that point, the DeKalb County Press was very interested in starting to build up a competition with the Chronicle. And I was still worried about my weeklies in Kirkland and Genoa, and the paper in Sycamore was not as, because I was a Genoa person and owned the paper. Well, we had a falling out, and they told me I could leave. Well, I found out because the paperwork had been drawn up by the corporation and I didn't pay a lot of attention to legalities. I didn't even have a majority stock in it. In fact, I only got $2,500 when I left, and I expected a lot more. I had Sonny,
and this was what, in 1967,
60? No, this was in 65.
65.
65
okay.
when we started, and so I was in fact ousted. They gave me some money, and I had to get an attorney in Genoa to get the rest of the payment that I was owed, and so I was out of a job, and no one in Genoa understood what happened because they thought I was the owner of the paper, and then all of a sudden it was taken over by DeKalb County Press, and I was out of a job. So I was terribly embarrassed, hurt. I left to go to California where I had a relative and to see about a job out there because I'd always wanted to go west. I had gone out there before and I loved the West Coast. And so after 10 days, I found a job to start on the San Bernardino Sun. And so I was, Kay and our one son, Todd, who had just been born in Genoa, came and joined me, and we moved out west. Well, 3 years later, the DeKalb Chronicle was sold. Eddie and Chuck Raymond and Bob Greenaway sold it to a Scripps Hagedon chain out of Coeur d'Alene, Idaho. And they found out that I had been here as editor of those papers, and also that the DeKalb County Press, which had sort of ousted me, that I might be a good choice. And so someone contacted me from here, and I don't remember who it was, and I then sent a letter, my resume, back to John McGaw, who was the publisher, in January of that year after they'd taken over the Chronicle. And by March, he had come out there to interview me, and I came back for a brief interview here. I could have visited my family at the same time. It was a nice free trip for me. And they hired me. They hired me in March, and I left California, where I was editor of the Livermore Herald and News, on fairly short notice because he needed somebody to come back because they wanted Greenaway out of there. They did not get along with Bob Greenaway, who was still in the office sort of filling in as editor. And so John McGaw wanted me back there by April 1st. So I came back and stayed with my aunt and uncle here in South First Street, Lila and Albert Schmidt, and took over as editor. They called it executive editor then because Scripps Hagedon always named their publishers the editor and publisher. And so for a while, and eventually moved over to the title of editor. Anyhow, coming back was a real, what should I say, for me, it was sort of not getting even, but a chance to come back and compete against the old organization that tossed me out. So as editor of the Chronicle, I found it an exciting time to come back and compete against your paper, which became, of course, the DeKalb County Journal and the Daily paper. And also the fact that we were just going to move into a new offset plant. They were going to leave the old downtown letterpress plant of the Chronicle and move out to Barbara Green Road, a new property, build a new building. And this was a tremendous experience to watch this unfold. Anyway, that's the story about how I ended up coming back to the Chronicle under the new ownership and competing with the old DeKalb County Press, which was then your paper. So I guess you can go back to how you got into it.
Yeah, and a lot had transpired, obviously, from the time you graduated from Northern. I went in 1966 after graduating. I was also on the 5-year plan, Barry. My first job was at Caneland High School, and I had a wonderful position there, and I was teaching journalism and English and speech. And who'd have thunk it? But I got drafted. And, they didn't draft teachers back then. Don't believe it. It was all up to your local board. So in 1967, in June, I found myself at Fort Leonard Wood, Missouri, in basic training. And for the next 2 years, was in the Army. Had a wonderful career. I must say that those 2 years in the Army gave me the opportunity to grow, gave me the opportunity to see parts of the world that I would never have seen before. I was fortunate enough to, and this was during the Vietnam era, but I was fortunate enough to spend 18 months in Germany and worked for the American Forces Radio Network. But after having been released from the Army after 2 years in 1969, I could have gone back to Canelan High School because they were mandated to rehire anybody who had been drafted out of teaching positions. However, they wanted me to teach something I really wasn't equipped or interested in teaching. So I had gone over, I had heard that there was this newspaper company, DeKalb County Press, where the new general manager, Ralph Sherman, had just been hired by John Castle and Fillmore Iskowitz and that group that you alluded to. Ralph Sherman and I had worked together at WLBK because during the last 2 years of my tenure at Northern, I worked for Jerry Cerny and Ralph Sherman and George Bigger and all those. George had sold the WLBK in 1965, so I had the opportunity to work with Ralph. Well, John Castle hired Ralph as his general manager, so I went in, and it was purely a social call. Ralph, how you doing? How do you like the printing business or the newspaper business? Well, we're looking for an editor, he says. Carl Carson had been the editor and was in the position of leaving, and I was looking for work, and I thought the idea of editing 5 weekly newspapers, was pretty good. So in 1969, I joined DeKalb County Press. And as you know, that began a 30-year career for me at DeKalb County Press, what became Castle Communications, what became Castle Print Tech. And it was just a great career. But going back to that 69 scenario where I was hired, you talked about those 5 newspapers. Mm-hmm. One of the newspapers that was started was the DeKalb Journal.
Yes.
Okay, this was the paper that was started and was actually the 5th of the 5 newspapers, the others being the Sycamore paper, the Kirkland paper, and the Genoa paper. Well, look at the headline in this. Precious bows out to pressure. Here was a picture of Ralph Precious, who was the city manager at the time in DeKalb. Now, I can't recall how the Chronicle, the daily newspaper in DeKalb, was hiring this or was covering this, but we covered it aggressively. We covered it big time. So that was in 1969. In 1970, Barry, this is still now the DeKalb County Journal, pew out at DeKalb Public Hospital. And this was an aggressive thing. Who's that byline on there?
Jerry Smith, editor. But you know what? You were scooping us as the Daily Chronicle is being scooped by the Journal, and the time that I came back in April, they were getting very upset with being scooped. And so I was able to add staff and add reporters. So I really I have to thank you for enlarging the Chronicle staff and making us more competitive, because they were pretty lethargic. They'd had the county all to themselves for many years. No competition, no one except the little weeklies, Hinckley and Waterman and Shabana and Salmonak, and I knew all those publishers from my college days. But yes, you made us much more competitive, and also taught us what it was like to get scooped, and it wasn't a very good feeling. So I had to really beef up the staff and become more competitive.
Well, by 1970, we had started a Sunday paper, if you recall. Now here we had a Sunday paper and the 5 weeklies. Mm-hmm. We were so sure that we could compete against you and at the Daily Chronicle. We announced on April 12th, 1970, we're going daily.
Yes.
Okay, and on April 20th of 1970, here is another newspaper. Good Morning, consolidation of 4 weeklies nets new morning newspaper. And I tell you, the next year and a half, Barry, interesting times, wasn't it?
That was
really interesting.
That was very upsetting to me because I had been with owner to the Genoa Republican and the Kirkland Journal, DeKalb County Journal, Kirkland they called it then, and the two Sycamore papers. To see those papers killed by DeKalb County Press was really personally
oh, sure. I can
rough
imagine.
for me to see that and see that those local communities lost their own voices, their own newspapers when everything was consolidated in DeKalb. And I still to this day regret seeing so many. All the weeklies in DeKalb County have died. Every one of them except the midweek, which is owned by the Chronicle now. So, but you had a reason for doing that because you wanted to become a daily competitor, right?
Yeah, well, not only did we want to become a daily competitor, and we felt that we could compete against what we considered at the time sort of the staid, old, established newspaper. And while you and I never, I don't think, took verbal blows at one another and that.
We had names for you behind your back. We called you the DeKalb County Urinal.
And we called you the DeKalb Comical. See, so we had a lot of fun. But again, looking back on it, Barry, I'm glad that we never did. It never came to blows, if you will, personally. But we had one heck of a time during the next 18 months. Competing with the Daily Chronicle.
Now, tell us about the Ebbison versus Collins.
Well,
the Chronicle was the Collins paper.
Right. Denny Collins was not a favorite. Denny was the dean of legislators in DeKalb County, and a good friend of John Castle and that group that started DeKalb County Press were, I think, very, very friendly with Joe Ebbison,
right,
who had been mayor, and Joe and Denny did not see eye to eye. So we did we did a lot of stories favorable, I think, to Joe and perhaps not so favorable to Denny Collins.
And our paper, being the staid old Republican newspaper, backed Senator Denny Collins because he was one of the good old boys, and he and the Greenways and Raymonds were longtime friends. So I guess so we felt obligated to back him and oppose Ebbison, of course, who was trying to take his job. And you can tell the story if you want to about Denny Collins and your experience. But he was our pick for re-election.
Right. I mean, this was a political thing. I think, as far as we were concerned, when I say we, the editorial staff, we wanted to cover the news fairly. We wanted to do what is right, and I think you folks probably had the same thing.
Right.
I think our publishers and our ownership had political views that perhaps weren't aligned so much together. But be that as it may, I remember a few things. Here's a picture of coverage at I think a League of Women Voters meeting.
Right.
And let me point out who these folks are. Barry, here you are as a young whippersnapper. This is Jo Ellen Frisch, who was head of the League of Women Voters. Russ Piggott, who was the news director at WLBK seemingly forever. Russ was a great guy. And there on the right is that young
Jerry Smith.
right.
Another whippersnapper.
Right. And so I don't know where we found those pictures, but here was how is this for a picture?
As you're 30 minutes in.
Okay. How about here's a picture of a young editor. How's that? Good-looking guy.
Good-looking guy.
Huh?
Yeah, right.
And you called the paper that he edited the DeKalb County Journal?
Yes.
My God. Here's a picture, Barry. Look at that.
Oh boy,
There's a picture at my
another
desk.
Jerry Smith at his desk.
Right. During this time, you had talked about how the Chronicle had built a new building. Well, so did the Journal, if you recall. This is a picture taken probably in the early 70s. We needed some more room in our facility because not only was our newspaper business very, very active, but we were becoming increasingly successful on our commercial printing business. So here are pictures of us. This is Ralph Sherman, Don Carter, Dick Seacrest, Dan Lafarian, myself, all on the management team at the time in building a new facility. And a lot of people in the DeKalb area remember Ralph Sherman. Here was a picture of a editorial page in 1969, 1970. Top of the week was a column that I wrote, and People, which was one that Ralph Sherman wrote.
I really was envious of Ralph Sherman's column, particularly because he managed to get names of 20 or 30 people every week in his column, and they were mostly prominent. It was not as broad. I did a column at the same time from around the county, and I did mine on Sundays, but I never could get the number of names that he got in there, and people loved his column because they watched to see their name in print.
Well, you know, Ralph was one of those kind of guys who was not hesitant to shake your hand, walk around town, and everybody got to know him, and his kids were in town, and you know, and he was the kind of publisher that I like to work for because he let me do my thing. And you know, I've said to folks over the years, I just wish the DeKalb County Journal would have put as much money into its advertising effort as they allowed me to have as the editor. Right. Here you were competing against me on the editorial side, and you know what you were up against. I had people running all over this county. I had more reporters than you could count on two hands. I had sports reporters covering this, that, and whatever. So, you know, if you were envious of anything, I can see why. On the advertising side, we just could not manage to get the big advertisers that the Chronicle had.
Well, see,
the grocery ads, Woolco was a large advertiser at the time, and I think that sort of helped to spell the death knell, if you will, because I would suspect that whatever John Castle received from what became the ultimate sale, which we'll talk about here in just a minute, of the DeKalb County Journal to the Chronicle, didn't even match what we had spent over that year and a half in terms of our effort to compete with the Chronicle.
See, the Scripps Hagedorn chain was very business oriented. They signed contracts with national advertisers and from car dealerships to large grocery chains by the year, and gave them a discount to keep them. And against the Chronicle, I don't think it was called unfair competition at the time, but they were able to lock in all these major advertisers and freeze the journal out. We even froze you out in some of the best comic strips because we would buy exclusive rights for a region outside of Chicago, for Peanuts and for some of the major comics that we wanted to hold on to. So that was a business game aside, and I think that the journal was not prepared to deal with that national media or national advertising competition. Also, Ray Robinson, who was the advertising manager of the Daily Chronicle for many years, he played golf. He was a member of the country club, played golf with all the big merchants and chamber of commerce people in town, so they were personal friends. They would not desert Ray Robinson and go to a new paper. The other thing that happened was Ray Robinson was named, when our publisher John McGaw was transferred to another paper in Iowa, Ray Robinson stepped up to be our publisher. And I was personally very upset in the beginning of 1972 when that happened, because I was also being trained to become a publisher of one of the Scripps Hagedorn papers. I was taken back to Coeur d'Alene and given training, but they found that he was much more connected to the business community. He was in the big Rotary Club. He was in the Kishwaukee Country Club. I was not. I was much younger than Ray, so they picked him. As a result, I think 8 months or 9 months later, I left the paper and went back to California.
You know, sometime late in '71, and this would have been the last several months of the competition between the Chronicle and the DeKalb County Journal. From what I understand, Dwayne Hagedorn and John Castle had a meeting in Coeur d'Alene.
Secret meeting.
Yeah, and this was a discussion about the two newspapers. and we were just really going at it. It was great for the community, just wonderful for the community to have two competing newspapers like that in a community this size.
You were morning and we were afternoon.
Yeah,
so
but having said that, Barry, I think they got together, and from what I understand, it became a situation of who was going to buy whom. I think Dwayne wanted to purchase DeKalb County Journal from John Castle, and John Castle was in a position, I think, to perhaps make an offer to Dwayne Hagedorn for the Chronicle. Having said that, as you recall what I had previously said a few minutes ago, the commercial printing side of our business had become huge. We were printing over 1 million copies of TV books for newspapers all over the country. We had devised the quarter folder with the glue-bound booklet and all that, and we're just really going gangbusters with that. And I think the decision was made in early December to sell the newspaper to the Chronicle. Now, what was tough for me, and we've shared this before, but those 3 or 4 weeks prior to the newspaper being closed on December 31 of 1971 were tough for me. I had been told that we were going to close that newspaper, but I was asked not to say anything to the staff. So here I am, the editor of the DeKalb County Journal, competing against you folks across town, knowing that I had young, aggressive, knowledgeable, talented journalists doing stories, that they perhaps could see going forward for months ahead, knowing that we were going to close it down on the 31st of December. Here was a paper, Friday, December 31st, 1971. Journal and Chronicle announced merger. And I think primarily what was happening is that the DeKalb Daily Chronicle was buying the 5,300 circulation list that the Journal had. And here's a picture of Ralph Sherman, as you say, Ray Robinson.
Did you sell subscriptions? That you were at first with free circulation in the first year?
We were free circulation. Yeah. We were mass circulation, much like you did in Sycamore when you started that weekly. And then we went on a paid subscription
that was
drive.
Tough. That's tough.
And I don't know what the Chronicle was in terms of paid circulation.
12,700 at that time.
We were 5,300. Yeah. We were able to do that within a year and a half. So I think we didn't have you on the run, I don't think, but it certainly made an impact, I'm sure, on your management team and on Dwayne Hagedorn and others about, the potential sustainability of the DeKalb County. It's interesting. Here are a couple of the quarterfold booklets. Here was one of the TV books, TV Time, TV Day. This one here is from the News Sun in Waukegan. We were very, very aggressive too with sponsoring things like the Citizen of the Year banquet
with Chuck Percy.
And Chuck Percy had come out for this. I mean, we were really, really going gangbusters. But when the DeKalb County Journal was bought by the Chronicle, here was a story that the Northern Star did. 50 left jobless. So it was big news.
Yeah. Sad.
And I will say that John and Nancy Castle, the owners, Ralph Sherman, the general manager, et cetera, at the time, they were very fair as we could be with those folks. But again, three of the toughest years of my life. And Barry, I must say that you and I have different perspectives of that year and a half, but it's something that I think you and I can go back and look at in many, many ways in a positive vein. And I still, to this day, there aren't too many left, but occasionally you'll meet somebody who remembers the DeKalb County Journal and remember the Chronicle. Right. And they'll say, God, we wish that was still the scenario today.
Yeah, competition is good for you.
Because, the whole state of the newspaper business as you know, has changed big time.
I wanted to mention about the 50 people left jobless. We were given resumes to look at, but our publisher said, don't pick any of them up.
Really?
I would have hired people like Steve Newton and some of those people.
We had John Mark, who was just...
Well, you had good sports staff, too.
Yeah.
We had Stan Shillette at the time as a newcomer in town who had come in from back east and didn't know the local scene, thought that they only should cover NIU and the Cubs and the White Sox instead of local baseball and basketball and high school. Big mistake. I had to turn him around. But anyway, I just want to mention that we did have a chance to hire those people, and I was told not to hire anybody from your staff. Now, we had just, when we moved to our new plant in early 1971 out in the, I guess it was 70, to Barbara Green Road, we switched from the old letterpress paper down to into offset, the newest way of printing. We had told our back shop employees that if they learned how to type and get away from the old line type machine, which is an entirely different keyboard than typing on computers, that they could be hired. That was a lie. They laid off 28 people in our back shop, out the door, 2 weeks pay, no matter whether you had been there 30 years or 10 years. We kept 2 people, Jay Elliott and one other man, I think Jimmy Jarvis, as typesetters on the Chronicle. They kept part of the press room crew because they could retrain them to print and offset press run. But I felt so bad about it because I had friends in that back shop, I had people that I had known for years, including a cousin of my wife who had just come back from Vietnam, was laid off. So they were very cutthroat. That company was very business oriented, dollar bottom line oriented. So when you folded, we lost staff because they said when I had lose a reporter or photographer, they wouldn't replace him because they didn't need to compete anymore, so they didn't care.
But you know, you headed off to California then.
And then I left.
And you know, and here, this was in 1971, 72. I would spend the next 28 years at Castle. And as I've told folks before, I had a wonderful career, 30 years. I was involved in production. I was involved in sales. I became president in 1983. We treated our people very, very good. We had gotten that employee count. We at one point had over 100 people working in that building because our commercial printing and our TV book side had become so successful. So, and of course, as you know, I don't know how much you stayed in touch with what we were doing at Castle Communications when you were in California, but you know, I left in 1998. After having served 30 years there, simply because I wanted to do something different with my life. I ended up going to the Community Foundation. Great career, great 10 years, the last 10 working years of my career.
Wonderful success story, too.
Yeah. And wouldn't you know it, that not too long after I had retired from the Community Foundation in 2008, 2009, who are these folks moving back from California to DeKalb?
Right.
Yeah. And
to retire this time, not to come to a new job.
I don't recall when we first saw each other when you and Kay moved back. But for those of you who may be interested, Barry and I are now
breakfast buddies.
Breakfast buddies every Monday morning. We have a group of 8, 9, 10 guys who get together at the Lincoln Inn in DeKalb and have coffee and trade stories. And you know, it's interesting that people within that small group love to see you and I go at it once in a while, and will seriously ask us questions regarding the media business and the newspaper business, etc. So it's been a great 55 years in DeKalb for me. I know you're a DeKalb County boy yourself, and it's great to have you and Kay back into the community. And I've enjoyed these few minutes chatting with you about our careers together. So
it's been great.
You from the DeKalb Chronicle, and me from the
DeKalb County Journal.
Yeah, right. We've remained close and friends, and I hope God willing he gives us a few more years to remain here in DeKalb as not only productive citizens, but citizens interested in what is truly happening in this community. And that's what good journalists should be doing, shouldn't they?
Well said, Jerry.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you. Jerry, I wanted to mention something that I was really pleased about, to be able to work with you on a project after we came back here in working up a book on the 50 years of history from the last DeKalb County book, which is called From Oxen to Jets. And you and I worked together on a couple of chapters, and you might tell us a little. I'll open this book up, and you can tell us a little bit about the book project.
The book was called Acres of Change, and it was a 50-year update on DeKalb County history, and it was a project of the DeKalb County Historical and Genealogical Society, and every editor and every writer in the book was a volunteer. And Barry, you and I worked on chapters. You and I co-collaborated on media.
Right.
And I also did a chapter on community service organizations.
Right, and I worked on the chapter on the historical landmarks and museums with Steve Biglin. So we each had different parts of
this was a wonderful project that we worked on. And as we were saying, as we were closing out the program a few minutes ago, it's fortunate that we both have the mental wherewithal and the presence to be able to do things like this. Right. And this was a wonderful project, and I hope that if folks have not picked up a copy of Acres of Change, they do so. I think these are still available.
Where might you find a copy of Acres of Change?
You know, Acres have changed now since we did this in 2013, so that's been several years ago. I don't know what
I can tell you where
establishment. Can you tell us where you can still get this?
We can buy Sycamore Antiques and Sycamore, Sweet Earth and Sycamore, Lehan Drugs in DeKalb, in Bowden's store in DeKalb.
They still have them? Okay.
Yes, they still have copies.
Okay.
And about 5 museums around the county, from Waterman to Genoa to Sycamore to the Joyner History Room, also carry these books. And we're hoping the new bookstore, Book World, will. We've delivered some sample copies to them.
that'd be great.
But I wanted to mention, Jerry, Kate Schott, who was the editor. She was the only paid person on this project, and she was paid very little. She spent 3 years of her life, a lot of her spare time as editor. She really had to work with a diverse group of people, and it based on the experience and the writing skills.
She was the editor of the Chronicle at the time.
Well, she was city editor. She became managing editor a short time. But anyway, I want to give a lot of credit to Kate Schott, because she tolerated us, and she had to prod us, and she had to send so many times copy back and saying either condense or expand, or you didn't do this and you didn't put enough footnotes in here. She was a tremendous editor, and I have to give her a lot of credit for staying with it. Most people would have walked away from this project after 2 years, and she stuck with it for 3 years to get us finally in print.
Barry, are you suggesting that someone would have a problem working with people like you and I?
Yes, I am suggesting
I can't imagine somebody
it's
having
true.
that problem.
We're hard to control.
Barry, again, great conversation.
Right.
And
wonderful working with you.
Nice working with you.